Plato's Atlantis was born from a philosophical thought experiment. The legend of Dwarka, however, persists as a foundational tradition for over 1 billion people, a story preserved as a specific history tied to the soil of the Indian subcontinent. The ancient texts are geographically precise. They place this kingdom exactly here, on the far western edge of the Indian subcontinent, built on a coastal outcropping in what is now the state of Gujarat. The verses of the Mahabharata describe a city built to be impenetrable. Thick stone walls rose directly from the shoreline, forming a massive coastal fortress designed to protect the kingdom from naval assaults. Inside those walls sat immense wealth. The texts detail a bustling maritime hub where ancient naval trade routes converged, filling the harbor with hundreds of merchant vessels. For centuries, modern historians reviewed these descriptions and filed them away as spiritual fiction. The sheer scale of the architecture seemed impossible for the era, leading scholars to assume the epic poetry held no physical, historical truth. According to the epic, the city reached its zenith under the rule of Krishna. The verses describe advanced urban planning, massive stone harbors, and gleaming architecture built right against the water's edge. The poetry outlines a highly organized society. It details busy dockside markets, wide public squares, and citizens navigating a functioning economy. Details that sketch a real, breathing metropolis rather than a supernatural realm. Then the narrative turns. Krishna departs the city. A devastating prophecy, known as the Curse of Gandhari, falls over the ruling Yadava clan, condemning their magnificent capital to complete ruin. The texts use the environment to signal the impending doom. Heavy storm clouds roll over the horizon, the sky darkens at midday, and the sea begins to churn aggressively against the coastline. Ancient cultures lacked the vocabulary to record dropping barometric pressure or shifting tectonic plates. Instead, they encoded the violent warnings of a natural disaster into the framework of divine curses and spiritual omens. The omens manifest physically. The epic describes a violent degradation of the weather as colossal waves begin to assault the stone seawalls, battering the defenses under a torn sky. The Mahabharata is highly specific about the mechanism of destruction. It states that the ocean itself rose up, commanded to take the city back into its depths. The coastal walls eventually breach. A massive sudden flood engulfs the temple spires and the public squares, sweeping away the architecture and the entire Yadava civilization in a single catastrophic sweep. When the skies finally clear, the texts claim the erasure is absolute. Where a sprawling metropolis once stood, there is only open water. With no physical trace to examine, the history of Dwarka was locked away in the realm of myth. That absolute erasure stood unquestioned until modern marine archaeologists decided to test the ancient claims. They descended into the deep waters of the Arabian Sea, exactly where the texts claimed the city sank. Resting on the seabed, divers found massive stone blocks. They mapped out distinct submerged geometric structures and square foundations that do not occur naturally. Underwater, the teams documented upright stone pillars, massive architectural doorframes, and heavy stone anchors, remnants of a maritime presence that predates the known historical record for this coastline. Terrestrial excavations on the adjacent modern shoreline corroborate the findings in the water. Dig sites reveal a continuous line of ancient human habitation extending right up to and then beneath the crashing waves. Marine archaeology identifies these remains as an advanced coastal settlement that succumbed to a significant flooding event, providing a physical framework for the disaster described in the epics. The exact alignment between a mythological claim of a sunken port and the physical reality of a submerged city forces a re-evaluation of how we categorize ancient epics. Historiographers refer to this phenomenon as deep memory. Pre-literate societies rarely invent their foundational stories out of thin air. There is almost always a physical catalyst. Geologists propose a specific local mechanism for this event, A sudden tectonic shift triggering a massive tsunami or a rapid post-glacial sea level rise simply erased a prosperous trade hub from the map. The survivors who fled inland carried the trauma of that flood with them. Over centuries, they processed the devastation through oral tradition, gradually elevating a terrifying natural disaster into divine poetry. That deep memory never faded. Millions of people travel to the modern coastal city of Dwarka today, bathing in the waters and keeping the ancient tradition alive. The correspondence between these sacred verses and real geological data suggests that an ancient oral tradition may have preserved the memory of a natural disaster across several millennia. Could there be more truth behind these stories than we realize?